Hi everyone, welcome to the final part of the Lord of Blights Masterclass. And yes, this is also my last video on YouTube, and I'll catch up after the part 10 of the Masterclass at the end, and we'll just say a quick goodbye as well. So basically the model is finished and you're going to see the last part now. And part 10 is all about the base and putting the model onto the base and finishing off the miniature. Remember, the aim of the masterclass was to give everybody the opportunity to learn something and learn different techniques as well, for free as well. So, and hopefully anyone that's following along is getting on really well with it. And in this final part as well, you get to make your own base and have a bit of fun with it as well. So up next is part 10, and then we'll catch up after part 10 and do a recap and say goodbye. Cheers. Hi everyone, welcome to part 10 and the final part of the Lord of Blights Masterclass. So this is the part where we tackle the base for the model. So the model's all painted now, he's ready to go on a base. So this is the base that comes with the model. So obviously if we just put him on here, it'd be a bit boring. So originally the plan was to sort of build a scenic base for him and do some fancy stuff, but I'm a little bit restricted as to the things I can use in this video. So I'm going to use this base. So this is one of the bases from the Shadespire Steel Hearts warband, and it's actually already sculpted for me, and it's all ready to be painted, and for the model to go on top, it actually fits really well. So I've already done a test with that. The only thing I did change on the base was I put a Stormcast helmet on there as well, just to show maybe that's what he's been doing. And we're going to paint the base, and then I'm going to add some snow effects to it, because in the planning video it talks about maybe doing him in like a cold environment. So I've undercoated it black already. And what I did do was just holding the model with some tissue so we don't destroy any of the paintwork, was just to check that it fits nicely on that base, and it does, and I'm happy with that. And the other good thing about this base is it's plastic, so we can use plastic glue to attach the model to the base without having to do any pinning or anything, because it'll melt the model onto the base and be very solid. If we'd made a base out of, say, slate or any other material, we'd have to pin the model using pins through the feet into the base. We don't need to do that in this case anyway, so we're quite lucky. But yeah, bit of a cop out, but this is what we're going to do. So if you make your base, or you can use a base like what I've done, a pre-existing sculpted base, then just follow along with the painting steps. But you can just make a base out of stones and sand, things like that as well. But I'm just going to use this for today. So we'll get started with the painting in a second. Okay, so we can get started painting with the base now. So I'm going to do the stone areas, the rock areas in Skaven Blight Dinge. So all of the stone areas, Skaven Blight Dinge, a couple of coats of that. So get it on there, let it dry, do another coat. So I'll do those with Skaven Blight Dinge, and then at the same time, while between layers drying, I'll do all of these sand areas around the edge of the base in Mournfang Brown. Do a couple of coats of that as well. So whilst that's drying, I'll work on this and come back once that's done. Okay, so that's those two base coats done. So next I'm going to do an overbrush with Storm Vermin Fur. So I think I mentioned overbrushing before. It's like dry brushing, but with more paint. So basically just going to go in over the top of most of the surfaces using a large brush. Making the brush pretty flat like that, just hitting the top. So this is just on the stone areas, so we're just lightening it up. So do that, let it dry, go over it again. So we don't have to be super controlled with it, just get another lighter tone on there. So I'll do this over all of the stone, a couple of coats, and come back. Okay, so that's the Storm Vermin Fur overbrush pretty much done now. You can see that it's just made it a bit lighter, added a bit of contrast. So speaking of contrast, I'm going to be using Black Templar. So I'm just going to add a touch of water to that, just to help it flow a little bit. And I'm going to give the whole base a coat of Black Templar. You can thin down black paint if you prefer to use that. I've just got some Black Templar, so I want to use a few contrast paints on this base. So just keep it moving over the whole thing. Let it flow into all those recesses, all over the rock. Just everywhere. Just keep your brush moving fast. That's the trick with contrast paints. Keep the brush moving. Don't let it dry until you're completely happy with it all. So I'm going to do this let it dry and then come back for the next stage. Okay, this Black Templar is pretty much dry now, or it's nearly there, so I'm just thinning down some wildwood now with just a touch of water, and I'm just going to wash that in some selected areas on the base real quick. Just be loose with it, have some fun. Just to tint some of the areas with some brown. We add some highlights. And don't worry about adding water to contrast paints for doing this, because we're not using contrast paints in the traditional way, so don't worry about that. We're just really using them as a glaze, just to add a bit of colour on. So I know there'll be people that will be wondering why we're not using the contrast medium. You can if you want to, but water's good enough just for this job. You must use contrast medium if you're using contrast paints for traditional contrast painting though. So like you can see, I'm just dancing it around the base really. Just picking out some areas. Just because we've got some warm tones in here because we've got a warm sandy colour. So we don't want them to sort of feel separate. So just doing that here and there. Just before we carry on. So I'll let that dry. Okay, so the wildwood and the Black Templars are nearly dry on top. I just thought whilst that's drying we can get going with just highlighting up the sand that we've painted on the base. So I'm just going to take some Talon sand and then I'm just going to do like a light overbrush on the Talon sand there. Just to pick up a highlight just on the sand areas. Then load your brush up again once that's done. Keep going. Now I'm using an older brush here, so it's not my decent brush. It's my reserve brush, so this is what I use for any controlled dry brushing or over brushing, so this is perfect for this. So when your brush retires, it becomes this brush. So I'll do that. Okay, so we've just added a little highlight onto that sand now. We'll go back to that in a bit later. So now using that same reserve brush, as it were, so it's like a small, slightly worn-in brush. So using Storm Vermin Fur, I'm just going to go and I'm going to do a controlled sort of overbrush highlight, just focusing on the areas of the base that I want to get a little bit lighter now. So around the edges of the flagstones, go around all of those. So you can see it's sort of like a dry brush, but very controlled. Quite difficult to explain. So I'm going to go around all of these areas. Basically, I'm adding a quick highlight on around the flagstones. And I'll do that around the front of the base as well. Keep loading the brush back up. The Storm Vermin Fur. Building it up gradually. Being quite gentle with it. Just get that colour back on that. So I'll do that and show you how that looks. Okay, so that stage is done now. You can afford to be a bit rough with it because we're going to be covering a lot of the base with snow anyway. Well, I will be. I don't know if you're going to choose to do the same thing. So I'm going to take Administratum Grey now, using the same brush, and I'm just going to go much more controlled just on all the edges, the flagstones and all of those stones. So just use the flat of the brush. So I'm almost sort of dabbing it on, you can see that, just to keep it quite loose, so it makes it feel a little bit more stone-like. And then you can also add a few, just touch your brush towards the centre of the stones here and there, just to get a few scratches and marks on. I'll go around and do all of those and show you how that looks. Administratum Grey sort of rough highlight done there, you can see it's just picked out those edges of the stones. So there's some leaves on this base. Now ideally I probably wouldn't want them on there, so obviously we're going to be doing the base in like a snow sort of scene, so I'm going to do these as like dead leaves. So this is Doomball Brown. I'm going to paint all the leaves in Doomball Brown. And I'll probably, whilst they're drying, I'll do the skull in Xandri Dust at the same time. So I'll paint the leaves in Doomball and do the skull in Xandri Dust. And we'll come back after that. Okay, so I've base coated those leaves there, and I've just base coated that skull. So I thought, whilst I'm at the base coating stage, I'll just base coat the Stormcast helmet in Retributor armor. So I'll do a couple of coats of that. And down with water, obviously. And there's a vine here on the base, so I thought I'd do a base coat of Castellan green on that as well. So I'll just paint all of that. I don't know if your bases have got these elements on there, but this is what I'm doing on mine. So it's quite an interesting base. So I'll paint these in. I'll come back in a second. That's the base elements there, all base coated. So I'm going to be working on all the different elements at the same time now. So the leaves, I'm just going to give them a quick sort of layer highlight of Scrag Brown. So that's going to be just leaving the Doom ball in the centre there. Just keeping it quite broad over all the leaves. And I'm going to do the skull is going to get a highlight of Ushabti bone all over, except for the recesses. So just like we usually do. Just leaving the base coat in the recesses, a couple of thin coats there. Keep your paint thin. Let it dry, go over it again. I'll do that on the skull. The vine, I'm just going to give it a highlight of Strachan green. So just picking out the raised areas with Strachan green. And the helmet, the Stormcast helmet, I'm going to give a heavy wash of Agrax Earthshade all over. I want it to make it look like it's beaten and so it's not too pristine. Plus I need to dull it down a lot because I don't want it to draw too much attention away from the miniature. So that's the risk with this. So I'll let that dry. I'll probably do another coat as well of Agrax over the top once this dry. So I'll get those done and we'll come back in a second. So just whilst the Agrax shade's drying on the helmet, I just thought I'd just go and paint a couple of these leaves in a slightly different tone of brown so they don't all look the same. So this is XV88. So I'll just pick a couple of these. Just sort of make it a bit more random so they're not all exactly the same. So just go over quick a couple of those. Okay, so I'm going to highlight the skull with Screaming Skull. So that's just as we always did on the rest of the Masterclass. So just keep it thin, concentrate on those raised areas. Keep the camera. So I'll do that on the skull, have a highlight. And then on that vine, I'm just going to add a little bit of that Screaming Skull in whilst we've got it out to the Strachan green, just for a fine highlight on the vine. Just on those raised areas again. Just picking those out. Give it a natural highlight. Okay, so at this point I'm just going to wash everything with Agrax Earthshade, well, all the leaves. I'm going to give those a heavy wash of Agrax. Just letting it run into the recess there. All the leaves. I'll even do the vine as well, just to give it a natural brown shade. And I'll have a more focused shade on the helmet again, just to tarnish it a little bit more. I'll go over that. And I'll also add a shade, not an all over wash, but just a focused wash on the skull, just to shade it a little bit where needed. I'll come back once all that's done. Okay, the Agrax wash is dry now, so I'm just going to take a little bit of Retributor armor, thin that down. I'm going to give this helmet a slightly sort of battered, pitted finish, so just doing that stippling effect that we did on the main bad guy. Just going to do that in those areas where you would probably see the highlights. So we don't have to be really neat with it. We want this to look battered and a little bit tarnished. Nice and quick. I'll do that. And we'll add a highlight on the skull just with white. So just on those edges where you would pick it up. Where you've got like rounded areas where you want to add a highlight, like the top of the skull, just thin the paint down a lot. Just gather the paint in towards the middle there. And resist the urge to mess with it too much, just let it dry. Then go over it again and you'll get a nice natural highlight. And all the leaves, I'll give them an edge highlight with Talon sand. So I'll just go around all of those. Just picking out those edges. Talon sand. So they're all highlighted. And then I'll probably just use a little bit of Ushabti bone and just pick out a little bit of that vine here and there, just with that lighter colour. So I'll do that and come back. Okay, so that's all done now. So just going over that Stormcast helmet with Liberator Gold, just doing that stipple again, just in the areas where the light might catch even more so, just at the top, on the edges, things like that. Don't need a lot, you don't have to be very neat, just make it look a bit battered. Okay, so at this stage I think I want to start getting some washes of colour into the base a little bit more. So we've got a model that's going on top of it, which is predominantly green and warm browns. So I want to get some of that into the base, you know, for that reason really, so that it ties the model into the base, so the model doesn't seem really separate from the base. So using Incubi Darkness, I've thinned that down to like a wash consistency. And I'm just going to pick some areas of the flagstones and just glaze in some of that dark green colour here and there, just in some areas. This will really pull the model into the base so it won't look so separate. Sit it in that environment really nicely. So I'm going to do some of those here and there. You can let it dry and go over a little bit more. It's really up to you how much you want to put on. Might put a bit on that vine as well, just right. So when you look at stones and things like that, if you look at reference, they're all manner of greens and browns. It's not just grey. Grey should just be your base coat for the colour that you put over the top. Just getting that in there, random places. Once it's dry, that colour will fade in quite nicely. And then we've got warm browns as well. So I'm going to thin down some Doomball brown to that same wash consistency. You can do this whilst the Incubi is drying. And I'm just going to pick a few areas, just get that really warm brown in here and there. And I'll just set off that stone, make it feel a bit more natural. Just a few areas, just blob it on. Have some fun with it. It will dry really subtly and nicely on that stone for you. Get this done and we'll come back and show you what it looks like when it's dry. So those coloured glazes are dry there on the stone. You might see it slightly. It's going to pick up in the camera a lot more for you. So I'm just going to do Stormhouse Silver, just using the flat of the brush, just the edge, and I'm just going to pick out of edges of this helmet here. You don't have to go around and meticulously edge highlight all the edges, just stab on the odd highlight. So we don't want to draw too much attention to this dude. But he's got to feel like he's got a few highlights on him, so I'll just give that a quick highlight. So I'll probably give that a highlight and then I'll paint the edge of the base in with black, a couple of coats. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do with this highlights now with the base is I'm just going to take some Pallid Witch Flesh. It's a nice natural highlight colour this, and it's good for stone. It's quite light, so I'm just going to use the the reserve brush, the one we were using earlier, and I'm just going to pick out the odd highlight here and there, just on some edges of the stones, not on all of them, just to really add some contrast in the stone, some interest here and there. So I'm just going to go around there, just, you know, just dabbing it on like you see, just give it a natural feel. And I'm going to go around and do that just to finish the painting. There we go. Okay, so I've got the paintwork done on the base now. Well, I'm pretty happy with that, and I've painted out the edge of the base in black as well. With display bases, I always prefer to have a black edge. It just makes it feel really neat and finished. So just checking with the model. So I've got the model here. So I'm just checking again with the positioning where he's going to be. So I sort of like lining him up. Luckily, he covers those holes that are already on the base, so I didn't have to fill them. So that's where he's going to locate anyway. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some snow effects onto the base now, because I always imagined him in quite a sort of cool environment. So we're going to add some snow effects, and we're probably going to be covering up some of our hard work here. So I'm going to use this texture paint called Valhalla Blizzard. Now, I've not used this before, but I've seen it being used, and it looks pretty good. So I think what we're going to do is the way I'm going to use this is I'm going to use an old brush, and we're literally going to spoon it out. And we can put as much or as little as we want of this on. You don't have to add it on if you don't want to, but I'm going to go for like the snowy, icy base. Now just checking with where he's going to line up. So I want to do the snow before he's glued on, so that I can play around with it a bit more, because I don't want to accidentally get any snow on him either. So I'm literally just going to start putting it on. And you can use the brush to move it into place. And it can be spilling out quite a lot, and you can put it on, let it dry, and then add even more to sort of pile it up if you want to. So it looks like it might be quite fun to do. You can imagine like snow drifts. So I think you can have a bit of fun with this. So I'm going to put some on, then let it dry, and then maybe add a bit more, and then come back and we'll add some colour into it as well. Just leaving it white on its own is it's a bit boring. So I'm going to do that and come back and see what it looks like. Okay, so that's the Valhalla Blizzard sort of applied now, sort of like random sort of areas. I've left room for the feet, so when we glue them on. It's still drying at the minute, it's about halfway dry. But whilst it's at this stage, I'm going to take this contrast paint, a thematic blue. I've used this before, and it's really nice contrast paint. It's a lovely colour as well. So I'm going to thin this down quite a bit on the palette, so even there's hardly any pigment in it now. Whilst the Valhalla Blizzard is dry, I'm just going to drop it in a few places here and there, just to get a bit of colour into the snow. I'm doing it whilst it's wet, so that it sort of like soaks in. So just where you might think, okay, that'd be a bit of colour, like in a shadowed area in the snow. I'll drop a bit of this colour in. It's just going to add a bit of interest into it. So it's not just flat white. And because it's wet, it'll soak in nicely as well. And then I'll just leave this to dry completely. Then the whole thing, the snow and the contrast paint, till it's completely dry and solid before we attach the model. I'm just going to go around and add some of this because I quite like getting these blue tones into the snow. I'll carry on with this and let it dry, and then show you what it looks like once it's fully dried. Okay, so that's the athematic blue, sort of added in some areas there on the snow. You can see it's just giving it a little bit of a nice blue glow there, it's giving it that frosty feel. It just adds another dimension to the snow. So I'm going to glue this guy onto this base. I'm going to use a small amount of plastic glue and move him into position, and that should do it. And I'm going to be very, very careful with it, and I'm not going to film it. So wish me luck. I'm going to come back, I'm going to glue him into here, and you'll see the next thing you'll see is the model on the base. Okay, so he's all glued on. Here we go. And here he is, all assembled, and on the base, nice and safe. So it wasn't too difficult, just a little bit of plastic glue there, and just let him dry. So you can see now it's all in place where it should be. quite happy with the result and how he looks on the base. So I think what I'll do now is, rather than talking about him as he is, I'm going to take some photographs and throw the photographs up next and talk through the model and do a recap of the whole series, and we'll just have a chat about how we got on and everything as well. So that'll be up next. So there he is. There's the finished Lord of Blights model now, all assembled and on his base. I think we should recap everything that we've been doing. So like, the main exercise for this whole masterclass was really playing with colour and contrasting tones and different hues and things as well. So there's lots of warm tones and cool tones going on, and that just adds interest to the model, and it helps basically pull the model together by combining those tones into the different parts of the model. So as I was saying, the green is quite a cool green, but it's got warm tones in the shading, and the skin's got warm tones, but it's got green tones in it as well, so it pulls that in together. And it's the same with the metallics. The metallics is, we're going for a warm copper colour, but that's got very cool green tones in it as well, so it doesn't look so separate from the rest of the model. And then what we did was we did a nice cool snow base to pop out all of those colours on the model, so it really makes him feel even more vibrant as well, and sort of sets him in that scene. And all those blue tones in the model, and then in those greens as well, sort of sit really well with the snow base. So it's been a really fun model to paint. I hope you guys enjoyed following along the masterclass, and hopefully you learned a little bit as well, because I tried to incorporate lots of different techniques, so there was always something new to learn in each of them, in each of the classes. So what I'd like you to do is post your finished models on Instagram and using the hashtag Lord of Blights Masterclass, and I'll see everybody's results on there. Cheers, guys. Thank you. Okay, so that was part 10, and hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and maybe you can do your own base and have a bit of fun with it as well. So here's the model here, he's all done, and this miniature is actually going to be a gift for one of my friends that I work with, David. It's his birthday soon, and he sculpted this miniature, so I thought it'd be a really nice gift to give him this painted miniature, since how he keeps saying I've not painted him a miniature yet. So David, this is for you, happy birthday. I just hope you guys enjoyed the masterclass series. This is the last video on YouTube that I'm going to be doing. Unfortunately, I can't continue, but I will always be on Instagram. So what I'm hoping is anybody that took part in the masterclass series will use the hashtag Lord of Blights Masterclass and put the images on Instagram and share them and show me their progress, because the aim with every video that I had was to share my knowledge with people for free, so that they could then learn and then pass that knowledge on as well to other people. So that was the only thing I asked, remember, in one of my other videos was, if you learn something, freely give that information onwards to other people as well. So, and just continue to do that, please. But I'll always be on Instagram, and so you guys can catch up with me on there. But yeah, there'll be no more videos, unfortunately. And I'll see you soon on there then. See you later, guys. Thanks for everything. Bye.